Okay, so first of all, why? Why did I do this? There's a whole list of reasons why I did this. I started my first business when I was 19. Having come back from a visit to some family in the US, I saw in the US these sandwich bars. And this is an incredibly long time ago. We're talking 40 odd years ago now. And there was no such thing as sandwich bars in the UK at the time. And I started a little business in Shirley High Street making sandwiches for people for work. And then added a van and started going out delivering sandwiches. So all these guys that you see out on these industrial estates now that come and deliver sandwiches to you, that was my idea. I started that in the UK because I was the first and only person at the time to do it. It was a disaster. It was an absolute disaster. Getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning to meet the baker sort of seemed to lose its sheen after a few years. And yeah, I decided I just couldn't keep it up. And I couldn't really, I know now that I didn't put enough money into it. I didn't go and get enough money to expand it and make it really work. So that was a good lesson at the time. But yes, I've always wanted my own business. I think that's really the big motivation for me. I've always wanted to have my own destiny in my own hands. And I've wanted my decisions to be my responsibility. I didn't want to be in a situation which I had when I worked in corporate, where somebody else made the decision, but it was my responsibility, and I didn't like that. So if I go back to when I left school. When I left school, I was 15 and pregnant. And as you do when you're 15, you think you know everything, don't you? Got married at 16, had my son, had my first child. And after about probably 6 weeks of having the baby, I thought, this is really boring. I don't think I can handle this. This is so boring. And I really wanted to do something. So I had to wait till he was sort of old enough for me to farm him out to someone. And when I did that, I suddenly realised that nobody really wanted you if you didn't have any qualifications. So I did loads of different jobs. I worked in a booking shop, betting shop, bookmakers. I worked in pubs, and I did waitressing. I did all sorts of things. And I just thought, this is rubbish. This is just dead end. I've got to do something. So I went on a course. And I chose international trade. There was a government-funded course at the time that enabled me to carry. I was single again by this time. I'd been divorced by then. I was 18, I suppose then, and that you got support, and they helped you with the training. And I did international trade because I thought I want to travel. And I thought if I take international trade, that means that somebody else is going to pay for my travel because I can't afford to travel on my own money. So I did this course and I loved it. I absolutely loved everything about learning about business and oceanic law, international trade law, everything you need to know to run a business properly, how to run a set of accounts, all of that, loved it. And when I got to the end of those courses, I had to go and find a job. It was part of your final qualification that you had to go and find a job. And so I just looked through the papers, and the first thing that I saw was somebody was looking for an export administrator, and this company was an engineering company. And I just went along, basically and begged on my knees to get the job. And I got the job because I was really cheap, and I did know what I was doing because I'd done this course. At least I thought I knew. That's the great thing about when you come out of school or out of university, you think you know until you get there. And I really learned how international trade really works there, which was very helpful. But what I also discovered about myself was that I loved the technical side of the job. I really, really enjoyed the engineering and looking at the specifications and talking to customers about how they made this equipment. So I started then to pursue my engineering degree. And I moved through a couple of corporate companies. And this then really comes to the reason why I wanted to start Corotherm, is because I didn't like the corporate culture. I didn't like the way that they treated people. I didn't like the way that they ran things. Bearing in mind, this is quite a long time ago now, and so things are a little better now, I think, than they were then, but it was pretty dire at the time. I was very restricted in what I was allowed to do. My specialisation, if you like, was the Middle East, because the businesses that I worked for were oil and gas based, and at the time there was a massive boom in the Middle East. And so I thought, well, nobody wants to do this. I'm going to specialise in that bit because nobody else wants it. So that gives me a differentiation. I can sell myself on that if I have that knowledge and those connections. And I had lots of restrictions put on me by people who'd never been to the Middle East, said I couldn't go there because I was a woman, which is rubbish. So I moved on to these various companies, and then finally I managed to get, I was headhunted actually. I managed to get the people that wanted me to work for them and expand their Middle East market to allow me to have my own company. And so they gave me a little bit of capital, and I started the business up and recruited people, developed them. We ended up having 4 different companies looking after the whole of the Middle East region and a load of project work for the oil and gas industry. Little did I know at the time, but they were overstretched, they'd overtraded, and I found out that actually they were going to make all of my guys redundant and take all of the work that we'd developed over the 5 years we'd been there back up to head office to save their jobs. And they were going to get rid of all of us except me, and I was supposed to be running this from the head office now. And I basically told them to stuff it, because if they could have done that, they wouldn't have needed me in the first place, would they? So as you can tell, it's still rankles. I do speak to them, you know, I still know the guys, we do speak, but I won't ever forget the way that they treated my people that I'd helped and got jobs and developed them, and I was devastated at the time. So I thought, right, I'm not doing this again. I'm going to go and do this for myself. Basically, these guys gave me practically no money at all to start the business because I brought immediate business with me. And so I thought, why would I do this for someone else again? I'm going to do it for myself. And I'd just given birth to another baby, so it was quite convenient actually to be able to work at home, which at the time was quite unusual. That wasn't really something that was a common thing, that you worked from home. So I thought, well, I can work from home, I can sell some stuff. I was married at the time, and so I had somebody who could support me, which is, you know, that's quite a big thing, because it's quite difficult to strike out like that on your own if you don't have somebody who can back you up on a day-to-day basis with, you know, keeping a roof over your head. So I didn't need to raise a huge amount of money, and I sold my car, and I wrote a business plan, which I'd done numerous times for other companies that I'd worked for, and I took it to the bank manager and convinced him to give me an overdraft facility. And basically I worked from my bedroom, baby under the desk, you know, just kick the car every so often when he moaned, and just ran the business from there on the basis that once I'd just got enough in the bank to start employing people, I was going to employ back all of my old team who had gone off to various corners of the earth to go and work. But there were a core of the management that I hoped would come and work with me. So I got myself to the stage where I'd had enough money coming through. I could see a cash flow forecast that would enable me to pay them something, but not a huge amount. So I approached the 3 guys who are now my fellow shareholders in Corotherm and asked them would they come and work for me for a very small amount of money to start with, but I would give them shares in the business. That was my biggest mistake. Not doing that was a mistake. The amount that I gave away way too much of the company to them because I thought that I had to get them. I didn't negotiate, I just gave it all away, and that was really silly. I shouldn't have done that. Because I now don't have control, that's not a huge issue for me. I'm quite lucky in that, you know, I've known these guys forever. We get on very, very well, and we rarely disagree. There are times when we've, you know, almost parted company, but they've been very, very rare. So I'm quite lucky there, but that could be a massive mistake. That if you give shares to people that you're going to work with on a day-to-day basis, you have to be absolutely sure that never again in the future are you going to disagree with each other. And if you've got a vision, and you really must have a vision, if they disagree with it at any point, you're stumped, because you can't do anything if you don't control the business. So that is always something that I bear in mind, that if you have it and you have that control, if you've got a vision that other people can't see, and quite often they can't see it if it's quite a big idea, it's ambitious and it looks scary, people quite often will disagree with you. So you need to have control of the business. So the business, what is the business? This was my line number 1, by the way. We've only just got there, so we could be here some time. Corotherm specialise in supplying very high-grade materials to equipment builders in the oil and gas industry. And these pieces of equipment, quite big bits of kit quite often, go into very critical areas in process plant in oil and gas. We've had a pretty rough time of it lately, actually, as is everybody in the oil and gas industry, because the oil price went down, because they were spending like sailors when the oil price was at $130 a barrel, and obviously they've had to really shrink their organisations and their plans. But things are looking much better now, but we've been through this several times. I mean, the business is 28 years old now, and this will happen to us again, I'm sure. And we are planning for the oil and gas industry not being here at some point and shrinking, probably quite slowly, but that's the sort of plan that you have to have. And this is part of the vision. Somebody in your organisation, and if you're the owner and you're the founder, it probably needs to be you. You need to be thinking about where are you going to be in 10 years' time, not where you're going to be next week. Because you have to start planning and taking action to get there now. There's no point in thinking about, well, I've got to pay the bills next Friday. Yes, you do have to do that. You do have to think that. But at the same time, you need to be thinking about, where do you want to be in 10 years' time? What do you want to be doing? One of the other big reasons why, as I've said before about what was happening in the businesses that I worked in before, in corporate, is the way they treated people. I wanted to have a company that people wanted to work for. Now, that's not just because I'm a really nice person, you know, that's not the reason. The reason I wanted that was I wanted people to come to work and be productive. It makes good business sense. It doesn't make any sense to have people trudge into work and dislike it. We were talking about that earlier on, weren't we? That is not good business sense. If you have people that enjoy the job and enjoy what they do, and you treat them fairly, you treat them well, and make them understand that you care about them, not just in work, but outside work too, that pays off. You will get the best people. Even if you can't afford to pay big money, you will get the best people. It's really, really important to me. I wanted to have a business in that sector, which is pretty boring, to be honest. It's a pretty boring sector, you know. I sometimes say that I've spent nearly 40 years trying to make pipes sexy, you know, and I've never ever actually got there. I cannot do it. You know, it's a bit of pipe. It's not sexy. It's not interesting. It's pretty boring. But I wanted the business to be different to the businesses that we were competing with. I wanted it to be different, and I wanted it to be better. I wanted it to have integrity, and I wanted customers to want to deal with us, not have to deal with us, because it's what we do. So that was another good reason for me as to why I wanted this business. I had a skill. That was another reason why I thought, well, I'll do this because it's what I know. I'd already spent probably 12 years working for other people doing a similar thing in a similar industry. But I was good at what I did, and I knew that I was good at what I did. And so having that skill gives you the confidence to go ahead and just go for it, basically. And as I've said, I had a ready-made management team. We'd already worked together for about 5 years. We knew each other very, very well. I knew they were good at what they did. So for me, some of the things that you will potentially encounter when you start business, I really didn't encounter those problems, because one of the biggest problems is people. One of the biggest problems you'll have throughout your whole career and the whole time you're running a business is going to be people. And it's people that will make the business. I know it's a terrible cliche, but it's true. If you don't have good people, you've got no business. So that was the reason why I wanted to have the business. I wanted to be able to have that control so that I could make that business like that. And I'd tried to do it in corporate. I tried to get my departments within corporate to behave like that, but it was impossible because of the culture around them and the way that the businesses were managed. So that was a really big motivator for me as to why did I want this business? Why did I want to start myself? And so you really have to think about that. You know, how much do you want it is very important, but also why are you doing this? What is the reason? What's the vision? What is it that will drive you? What will keep you going when it's all just going horribly wrong? And you know, people are letting you down and the customers don't come and all the rest of it. What's going to keep you going? And it's that vision that you have to have that will make sure that you do keep going and you are still determined to reach your goals. So how? So a lot of you, I think, were hoping to understand how. Well, I think I've given you a little bit of background about the mechanics of it. I think writing a business plan, whilst it seems like a really boring thing to do and everybody tells you to do it, I think writing a business plan is very, very important because it makes you think about what the future is going to be. You usually have to write it for the finance industry. So generally they only want to know what you're going to be doing in 3 years' time. I mean, who the hell knows what they're going to be doing in 3 years' time? You know, I don't have a crystal ball. I've got no idea what's going to happen in 3 years. But they expect you to predict it. But what it does make you do, it makes you put down in words and put numbers behind it of what you think you're able to achieve and the reasons why you think you're going to be able to achieve that. And that's a really important start. If you don't have that, you don't know where you're going. So actually getting it down in writing and rationalising it in your head and having to explain it to somebody else is actually a very, very important part of getting started. And you may be able to write your business plan while you're working for someone else. You know, you can carry on working and earning a living, but you can still write your business plan and you can be working on it for a long, long time. But the research that goes into it, the knowledge that you already have, talking to lots of different people, making sure that what you're putting down is not what you wish for, but what's actually possible. And quite often you need to strip it all out and start again sometimes. You know, I mean, I've done this several times over the years in developing Corathem. I've had all sorts of huge ideas about things I'd want to do. And then when you start to really put them down in words and you have to rationalise why that's going to happen and how that's going to happen, you find actually that, you know, you've got it all wrong and you've got to start again. And you've got to be really, really ruthless with yourself. Don't try and pretend that this is going to be good when in actual fact you might in the back of your mind have a bit of a doubt. You need to be sure that what you're putting down you don't have huge doubts about. Contacting customers is these days an awful lot easier than it used to be. I think that's also very important. Not necessarily customers that you're going to recruit straight away, but talking to customers in advance of starting, maybe. If you can, I think it's much easier, as I say, to do that, but at the time I found that very, very difficult. I had to travel to do it, so I had to go out to the Middle East, and because that was my target market to begin with. It's what I knew, and I had lots of contacts there, so I went out and I talked to customers before I started, because I think that's actually also very important. What you think your customers might need, and when you actually start to interrogate what they think they need, you might come up with something completely different. The other thing that's very important to me, and I learnt this working in corporate, you need to make sure you've got processes in place. Don't start on a wing and a prayer with an Excel sheet, would be my recommendation. Even if you've got no money in the bank, get a set of accounts together and keep it up to date and close it every month without fail. So you always know where you are. You'll always know how much money you've got in the bank, whether you're making money or not. Don't guess about, oh, well, we're turning over £500,000, we must be making money. No, 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 no. You've got to make sure that you know for sure and you can forecast where you're going to be going. And if the orders don't come in, what's going to happen? How are you going to deal with that? So I made sure that I had systems in place. It was only me. You know, there was only me, but I had a system in place. What happened when an inquiry came in? What did I do with it? And how did I record it when I was doing a quotation? The records that I kept of customers and suppliers. I made sure that there was always a set of accounts running and that I closed every month, even when I was on my own, because that is absolutely vital. And if you get into the habit of doing that, you will always have control. Never let go of the checkbook until you've got to the point that you absolutely know you are able to let go of that checkbook. Don't hand your accounts over to one of the professionals and let them run it for you until you're absolutely sure you've got a grip of what's going on and you really trust that person to look after your interests. I did quite a lot of bartering, which was something that a lot of people didn't do at the time. So I bartered some of the things, my services, my technical services, my engineering services that I was able to offer with people that I wanted to give me help, or I wanted to get them to give me a service that I would have had to have paid for. And so that's always something to think about when you first start. Have you got something? Have you got a skill? Have you got something you can do, an ability that you have? I mean, at one point, I went and cooked for somebody in their house, because I'm a pretty good cook. And I got them to do my accounts for a year, because they were catering for 100 people, and I just went and did their catering for them for the day. And I said, okay, I'll do it for nothing. You buy the food, I'll do all of the work, and you do my accounts for a year. And they did. It was really good. So there's all sorts of things you can do to help yourself along. That has made me, that's the other thing about that has made me a fantastic network, because that person always remembers me, and they have introduced me to so many different people and so many different services, and that personal invitation, that personal introduction is very, very valuable. So if you have mentors here, that is a huge resource for you guys. Squeeze them until they scream is my recommendation, okay? Just squeeze every ounce of information, contacts, networks, and don't discount any of them. I never ever discount anybody I meet, who, no matter how far away from my business they might be in terms of their skill base or their sector, because you just never know. You never know. Never waste a contact. So these guys have done a great thing here by giving you this group of mentors, because they have a massive, massive network, and you really need to make sure you use that resource as much as possible. So, going on to who, which I think I've talked about quite a lot, the big thing for me is people. That was one of my motivations for having the company in the first place. It was one of the reasons that I wanted to get out of corporate, and I like people. So, I like seeing people grow. I like to give them targets. I like to give them. I like to put them in the outside their comfort zone. I like to push people and see what they can really do. And quite often they surprise themselves, and that's brilliant. That's absolutely. It's really, really fulfilling thing to do. And if you're going to get good people, the ones that will stay and the ones that will perform are the ones that you give freedom to. Allow them to make mistakes. Don't have a blame culture. This is, okay, you've made a big mistake here. Let's make sure we don't make it again. I mean, this is very basic standard stuff. I'm sure you've heard time and time again. But a lot of people find it quite difficult to really do this, because it is quite scary. When I first had the first set of staff, we had 4 people, and which were sort of new guys, new to the business, and we were training them pretty hard, and they were allowed to place all of their own purchase orders. I trusted them to know what they were doing, and we only put a limit of £150,000 on them. So they were allowed to go out and spend £150,000 worth of the company's money, but there was no other way for me to really know whether or not they could do the job. And so we were at risk at any one time for more than £500,000 if they'd all made a mistake. So what what we decided was that we needed to do that to see what their mettle was. And we knew we could, whatever the mistake was going to be, we could probably recover from it. You know, we could find a way around it. If it was a technical mistake or a commercial mistake, we were pretty sure that we could manipulate the job to work. So there was a big risk there, and we could have been wrong. You know, there was one particular occasion when I had to go to India and persuade a customer to give us £150,000 for a job, and the material was the wrong material, but we did manage to get round it in the end. But that was because it's so important that those people felt that they were valued, that they were trusted, and that was the only way that they were going to learn the job. It was the only way that they could really understand the gravity of what they were doing. If I treated them like children and watched everything they did and micromanaged them, they would never be able to stand on their own 2 feet. Those guys have now gone off all around the world, and they're all running their own businesses as part of the Corotherm group. So it pays off, and you will get some duds, no question about it, but you'll see pretty quick if they are. If they're not working, they're not able to do the job, or you've pushed them too far and you need to allow them to step back a bit, you'll work that out pretty quick, actually. We've grown as many people as possible in-house because within my sector there is a prevailing culture which I dislike and doesn't work. And, well, it doesn't work for me anyway. And so I wanted to make sure that the people that came through that were going to be the senior managers in the future, we had the right people there, they had the right attitude to things, and they had the right culture. So we spent a lot of time growing people from scratch, which limits you. It does limit you. You're not going to grow really quickly if you don't bring in these really capable people straight away. But what you do lose is your culture. You lose the thing that you really wanted, the thing that I really wanted, which was to make sure that the business was going to behave the way that I wanted it to, and we weren't going to go down this route of the corporates that I'd worked for before. And my big emphasis has always been on retention. I want to keep the people that we grow. I want to keep anybody that comes into the company. There is a prevailing joke in my business, and only one person has escaped, only one has escaped. And he actually, I'm godmother to his children, so he's not really escaped at all. That it's like coming to work for the mafia. Once you're in, you never get out. It's a lifetime. And you know, to a certain extent, it's true. Most of the people that work for us don't leave. I think we've only had probably a handful, probably 8 or 9 people that have left. Everybody else has been there, some of them straight from school, or more recently, people that have come in their 30s, and you know, they've been with us for 10 years or so. So for me, that's a really, really important endorsement of what we do. There are some downsides to that, however, because you can get too embedded if you're not careful. You can become complacent, and you can get into bad habits that are difficult to break because you've been in a place a long time. So to try and keep things fresh and to keep new ideas coming through, we constantly have youngsters coming into the business, and we try to make sure that they are kept occupied and they are always interested, and we let them go off and do various different jobs. But I also swap people around the business. So because we've got overseas offices, I can take people and give them as long or as little as they want. So they can go away for 2 years, or they can go away for a month or a week, and just swap them around. And because we have a global ERP system, they can do the job wherever they are. And that really helps to keep things fresh. If you're not careful, if people have no experience of outside, and there are some people in my business that have come, certainly on the senior side, they've come from school and they've never worked for anybody but Corotherm. I don't think that's always healthy on its own. You do have to bear in mind that you've got to try and keep those people fresh. You've got to try and keep them thinking new ideas and being up to date and not getting complacent and stuck in a rut. You know, it's not an easy thing to do, but for me, the experience and the knowledge and expertise that we've got in the business far outweighs any of the downsides. The other thing is that we always set out to have fun. And this is, I suppose, part of making people want to come to work for you and letting them feel that this isn't a chore. And obviously that's not going to be every day. You know, you're going to get up every morning for a week, maybe, now and again, thinking, oh God, I've got to go in this morning. She's going to be on my case again, you know. And I do see the heads drop sometimes when I'm in and out of the office because they think, oh God, she's here. And they know that there's, oh, she's in a good mood. Now what are we going to have to do? And that's not necessarily a bad thing, not from my point of view anyway. But ultimately, you need people to feel that they're not being stifled. And so if you're able to just take the chains off, so well, let's go down the pub, or get the Scalextrics out and we'll have a game, you know. And we've got Scalextrics on the wall in two of the offices, but it just depends. I mean, some of them are cricket nuts, and so they've got all sorts of bits of cricket kit that they practice on and stuff like that. But I mean, I think this is quite common now, but we've had this from day one. We bought a boat and put it in Ocean Village so that we could all go out and sit on the boat occasionally and just get out on the water. It's really good for you, that sort of stuff. And although you might be losing a bit of downtime in the office, our job is mostly office-based and obviously in and out of the works as well. But ultimately, you really need that break. You know, these people are human beings. You are a human being. You need to give yourself a break. And so having fun and doing stuff together, or not, you know, in little groups or whatever, for me, having fun as well as working is really, really important. I think there are a few companies that do actually allow that, but in my experience, certainly in the manufacturing industry, it's not common. So, you know, I would recommend that you do that and try not to lose the momentum, because it really makes a difference. I'm not going to go into being a leader because I don't really know how you do it. There's an awful lot of stuff talked about being a leader. There's an awful lot of stuff talking about leadership and how you can be a leader. And I've got nothing to tell you on that, I'm afraid, because you either are able to do the job that you do and bring people with you, or you're not. How you go about that is up to you. But I don't know what I do, let's put it that way. If I'm a leader, fine, yes, but I don't know how and I don't know why. It just is, that's the way it is. I think that it's because I have lots of ideas. That for me that's how I'm a leader. The only other thing I would say about that though is I do set an example. I'm not above cleaning the toilets if it's necessary. You know, I will do anything. I make the tea. If we're in a meeting, I don't expect people to wait on me. So I think that also makes a big difference to people. It means that you are approachable, and it also means that you're setting an example to other people. So that's about really all I can say about being a leader. I did write it down, but I thought, well, I don't really know what I'm going to say now. So I think I've sort of covered the what in terms of the what is it that your company does? And it sort of links back to why your company is. So you may think that you are, let's look at my business. You think that you are a supplier of pipe and fittings. That's what we do. But the reality is we bring expertise and we bring advice, support, and care, I think, that's the other thing, to customers. So the thing that we supply is pipe and fittings, and flanges and plates and bars and weld and wires and all the rest of it. But the reality is what we actually do is we get customers to want to do business with us because we help them, we support them, we give them as much of our expertise and our care. We really care about their project. We really do care about their project. We don't want it to go wrong because it's not good business for their project to go wrong. So we want it to work. We're not trying to push something down their throats because it's what we do. If what we do doesn't fit what they want, we will go and find something else, or we will tell them where to take it, and they can go with that project to somebody else who'll do a better job than we will. That's what we really do. So you need to be careful about, I mean, I think your business actually is a very, very good example of that. What you do is write algorithms, get the website set up, you know, give this service. But the reality is, as I explained to you earlier, you're helping somebody like me get over Christmas. Because Christmas is a trauma until Christmas Eve. You know, it's only when everything is wrapped and I've got all the presents in on Christmas Eve that I can relax. Because I'm terrified that I've missed somebody or I've bought something that's the wrong thing. So what you really do is help somebody like me relax and enjoy having a birthday party or a Christmas. So you need to think about that a bit more in terms of the thing that you're supplying, the service that you're supplying is the what. But think behind that about what is it that you actually are trying to do there. So I thought I'd do a few do's and don'ts. So, first of all, big one for me, be true to yourself. Don't try to be something you're not, because everybody will know. You can't pretend to be something you're not. You've got to be yourself. And that will also be reflected in the business and how you run the business. You might be really horrible, so your business is going to be miserable. But ultimately, you have to be yourself. You can't pretend to be something you're not. You need to consult and collaborate. I think that's absolutely, it's imperative to get things right because you don't know everything. So you need to bring people in, you need to collaborate with them as much as possible, and you need to make sure that you get all of the ideas in. But somebody needs to make a decision. You have to be decisive. You have to round all of this stuff up and decide, this is what we're going to do, guys. This is where I think we're going to go. This is how we're going to do it. This is where the money's coming from. That's what you will have to do. If it's your business, that's what you're going to have to do. And you can't put things off. But don't do what I did twice in 30 years and be so bloody determined that you were going to do what you'd set out to do that you didn't stop it soon enough and change direction and change your mind. I learned 2 hard lessons there. Financially hard, and also it was a blow to the business because it hit our confidence, and it was because I was too bloody minded to let go of my idea of what I thought was going to work. So whilst you get all of the ideas together and you are decisive, be prepared to change your mind. It's not the end of the world. You know, to be flexible and quick on your feet to change your mind if things aren't working is really, really important and could be the key to you surviving, because if you go on too long, you could basically kill the company. I've said this before, have a vision. Have a vision. It's a difficult one because sometimes you don't really know what that vision is. And it might be, I want to be there in a few years' time. And if it's money that you want, don't do it. If all you're doing is going into business to make lots and lots of money, don't do it. Because it's not what you think it is. It's hard work. It is lots and lots of years of hard work. You know, I've been running this business for 30 years. The oil price goes down, and now, you know, I'm having to really put my back into it again. Admittedly, not every single day, but I am having to think about where we're going to go with the business because of the oil price dropping. It doesn't stop. So if you only want money, get in and get out quick is my advice. And generally, you won't be happy. I believe that if all you want out of your business is money, then you're not going to be happy. So having a vision about where you want to be, who you want to be, what you want the business to be, because the business is an entity, it's like a person. So you need to know what you want that business to be and what you want it to look like and how you want it to behave. Plan long term, I think I've already said that. Make sure that you're thinking way ahead about where you're going to go, because the things that you put in place now could stop you doing that or enable you to do that. So always think about, you know, where are you going? Let the guys run the business once you've got it up and running. Let them get on with it, and give yourself time. Give yourself time to just sit and think and listen to lots of ideas and talk and network with people that might help you to come up with some new ideas. Build a specific brand is part of being and having a vision. Is if you build a specific brand, and when I say brand, I'm not talking about a logo or the way that you look. I'm talking about how you are seen in the marketplace. One of the great things that I have had 2 or 3 times now is in my sector, I have had people come to me and say, I want to come and work for Corotherm. You've got a really good reputation. And I felt like I want to burst, you know, I mean, it's just fabulous for me because that's what I always wanted. I wanted it to be a company that was seen as having a good reputation, to have integrity, to have a quality service, and people wanted to come and work for me, or for us. I mean, it wasn't just for me. And that for me was huge, and that was my brand, that was our brand within our sector. That's how we are seen. We are experts, we have integrity, and we will look after you, we care. And I know it sounds a bit weird in an engineering environment, but we are actually quite soft when it comes to things like that. We do like our customers, although they drive you crazy sometimes. I've already said know where you are financially, very, very important, and don't ever hand it over to anybody unless you're sure you can and that you are still able to control it if you want to. Strengthen the balance sheet at the beginning. That's also very important. That was a mistake I made. I invested quite a lot as time went on, and it would have paid me to hold back on that, but that's because I'm an impatient person and I wanted to get there quick. I would say that it's probably better for you to build the balance sheet a bit first and make sure that your cash flow is strong and that you have the assets that you need to do the job. You know, don't run it into the ground by investing in things and then finding that you've got a cash hole. Think big. I've always thought big, and I've never ever managed to get to a point where I think that's enough. I'm always being driven by the fact that I want more, I want it better. And so you do need to have a big vision. And my big vision when I was sat at that desk in the bedroom was I wanted a global business. I wanted to be a rival to those big corporates that I'd left behind, and we cause them pain. You know, we don't necessarily challenge them financially, but we take big chunks out of them, we take big bites out of them, and they don't like it. And I think that's brilliant. I absolutely love that. Do absolutely everything to the highest standard you can achieve, that you can afford. And it doesn't matter how small this thing is, do it really, really, really well. Have the highest quality standards you possibly can in absolutely everything that you do. And if you start off like that, you will continue to stay like that. That is a really big one for me, because you can't differentiate yourself if you don't do absolutely everything right. And it's little things sometimes, like the way that you present the office. So if somebody comes into your office and it's untidy and it looks a mess, that impression is a bad impression, and it gives the impression to employees that they can be substandard. So everything needs to be at the highest quality, even at the very smallest level. Care, that's a big one for me. You've got to really care about the people you work with, about the business itself, about your customers. Care for your suppliers. You know, don't treat them badly, because you'll need them and they'll look after you if you look after them. So you do have to care about things. And as I said before, give yourself thinking time. Really, really, I use aeroplanes as thinking time. I find it really good when I'm on a trip, nice 7-hour flight, I get loads done. I read lots and lots of magazines. I think about where we're going to go. For some reason, it seems to clear my head, and I'm able to really think about things and come up with ideas and come up with solutions. I do my best work when my back's against the wall. And now that's not true of everybody, but I do find that if I've not got trouble, I'm looking for it, because I need to have a problem to solve. I need to have something that's going to challenge me. And that thinking time allows you to do that, to be able to solve those problems and to come up with the new ideas. So, you know, sometimes you can be so manic that all of a sudden there's all sorts of stuff happening and you've not even really noticed, because you're not giving yourself time to think. And that is a really important thing. Walking out of the office in the middle of the day and going off for a stroll for a couple of hours is actually a very good thing. You know, it's give yourself a break, basically. Okay, so don'ts. How are we doing for time? I've not looked. Yep, we're okay, yep. As I said, don't do it for money. I think it's a big mistake. I think if you're doing it for money, you're probably not going to be successful, and if you are, you probably won't be happy. You need to be doing it for your own emotional reasons as well. There's got to be a driver, because this is hard. It's not easy to do. You'll hit all sorts of problems. They're brilliant successes that you'll always remember, and they'll make you feel fantastic. But it's a slog, and it's always a slog. No matter how big you are, no matter how successful you are, it will always be a slog. So just don't do it only for money. Don't give it away too much control. I think coming back to what I said earlier in the beginning, I made that mistake. There have been times when I've had to follow what my fellow shareholders have wanted to do, and the reality is it's wrong, and I knew that what I wanted to do was right. We've got there in the end, but it was a battle and it didn't need to be. So try to keep control if you can. At some point, you may have to hand over a chunk of control because you need the money. So don't limit the company by being obsessive about it, but find a way if you can, even if you have to hand over more than 50% of the business to get what you need, try to find a way of hanging on to some control through the way that you negotiate the deal. Because it could be that the people that are investing in you don't have the vision that you have. They probably don't have the vision that you have. And you won't be able to drive the business the way that you want it to go if they have too much control over how the business is managed and how its future is formed. Don't carry on regardless. As I said, I've made a couple of big mistakes by just completely ignoring the signs and being so determined to get my own way that we've come close to not failing, but really putting a dent in the business and damaging the business. And I've learned now that I have to be far more bendable when it comes to things that I've decided I wanted to do. And it's not good for me. I've got this iron streak of determination to get what I want. And it doesn't come comfortably to me to say, okay, I'm not going to get that then, am I? Because I don't like that. I don't like not getting what I want. But sometimes you have to. Sometimes you have to back off and say, okay, this isn't working. And you need to watch the signs and pay attention to what's happening and be prepared to change if it's necessary. But don't be a coward. Have some balls. Do some things that are really big and think really big. I've always wanted much bigger than I'm capable of, to be honest. The other thing is don't underestimate the amount of costs and time. So we are on don't. I just didn't know whether I clicked it. That's another mistake I've made. I've been over-optimistic about how quickly we will get there and how much I can persuade people to do something for nothing. I'm still quite good at persuading people to do some things for nothing. But ultimately, if you underestimate and then you go out and you raise money and you haven't raised enough, that's just as bad as not raising it at all. Because you'll get halfway down the road and find that actually you're not going anywhere because you need more money. And going back to the market again to get more money is going to be incredibly difficult if you haven't achieved the first time round, because that's how you'll be judged. If you've got that money with that goal and you didn't achieve it, going back and asking for some more so that you can still get there is a really, really tough call. So be pessimistic, not optimistic about how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take. Always give yourself room for manoeuvre there. Don't let advisors run the business. That's why I know how to do the accounts. That's why I learned how to run the accounts. I have had multiple arguments with auditors about how the accounts should be audited, the adjustments that they've wanted to make. And because I know how to run a set of accounts, I know how to put an audit together and I know how the accounts have to be posted and what the law is and what best practice is, I'm able to talk to the auditors and persuade them sometimes when they've wanted to do things that I don't agree with to my figures. I've been able to defend them. I've been able to defend my figures. And 9 times out of 10, in fact 10 times out of 10, I've been right. And they can give you a really big disadvantage. For example, the recent regulation that came in a few years ago about you having to put into your accounts an explanation of what the company is doing and where it's going. I'm not a PLC. I'm not going to do that. I'm not required to do that. I do not want my competitors to know what it is I do and where I'm planning to go next. The other thing is I don't have to put in full accounts. I'm not a PLC, but quite often advisors will come in and they'll go through the whole set of accounts and they'll want you to put everything in and publish the detail of your business. And depending on your business and depending on who your competitors are and what your competitive landscape is, you may not want to do that. You may not want everybody to know that. So don't always just swallow whole what they say just because they're a professional advisor. Question them every time. I've had some horrifically bad advice from legal advisors in the past who have gone the easy route rather than actually examine things properly. So always question what the professionals tell you and get second opinion. I'm a great fan of second opinion when it comes to things like that, especially if it's a fundamental, vital thing that you need to work out. The other big thing for me, finally, is don't be afraid of failure. No, my sandwich business, it was a failure. What was the other thing? Oh yes, yeah. At one point I was doing what you might call property development, I suppose. That was a massive failure. Not my area of expertise. Why did I do it? I have no idea. But there are things that you can do or things that you want to do, things that you desire to do, and you don't do them, you don't go for it because you think you're going to fail. And Corathon would be a perfect example of that. When I went out to the industry, customers and suppliers, and said, right, I've opened my own business up, I'm going to go and specialise in the Middle East, going to do packages with the oil and gas companies. They knew, quite a few of them, that it was just me, and nobody thought it was possible. Nobody thought that I could do it. And if I was so afraid of failure, I would never have started the business. So, and failing can teach you a lot of lessons. I mean, I've had failures over the years. Of course I have. Everybody has. Luckily, they've been failures that haven't killed us. But don't be afraid to fail, because it will stop you doing things that are really ambitious, and it will stop you doing the things that you really want to do. So that was my final don't. So, can we go to questions now?
Yeah, well, let's give you a round of applause. Go.
I think one of the biggest things with engineering is, not so much these days, but certainly then, engineers were just expected to do it faster and cheaper. That was it. Just keep making the same thing, but make it faster, make it cheaper. They weren't encouraged to be innovative. They weren't encouraged to think for themselves. They weren't given time to go off and think for themselves. I think that was probably the biggest thing. And I come across it still now, especially with some of the older engineering companies. They just want to be safe and carry on doing what they've always done. And they're afraid of the innovation, I think, a lot of them. I would say that was probably the biggest thing, yes. I think you start to know, it's almost like, I know most of you won't have experienced this, you almost know when your baby needs solid food. It's a very similar situation. You know when your baby, your company, it needs some solid food. And it starts to show in various ways, and this is again comes back to thinking time and paying attention. So don't get too sort of focused on the day-to-day, you need to come back and look. And when you know that that's the case, the decision-making process for me starts with the plan. I need to sit down and say, okay, here is an opportunity that I can see coming through. Here is something that we're already doing and I can see that is going to grow. If we're going to take advantage of that, then we need to do something about it. What is it we're actually going to be doing? Get back to a really basic fundamental. What is it we want to achieve? So an example of that would be, we supply, and we're probably one of only 2 in the world that supply a specific type of thin sheeting that is used in Saudi Arabia to clad the legs of the risers on offshore platforms. Now, this is just a usual thing in engineering. Nobody wants to change the spec. Everybody wants to keep doing the same thing. But I could see that A, this was overtaking us and our suppliers were struggling to actually supply the material, but also there was a lot of waste going on. And that's one of the reasons why we're having problems with supply lines and the supply chain. So we decided that what we needed to do was to do the pre-cutting for them. And so we would supply them with pieces that would fit rather than just sending the sheets out and letting them throw half of it away. And so we needed a laser cutter. And that was the sort of idea, that was the process of working out how we do it. And then you've got to have the plan. You know, where is it going to go? Who's going to operate it? How much is it going to cost? How much do we think we're actually going to be making out of this? Can we get the scrap price back, et cetera, et cetera. So you go through the whole process. Then you need to put your figures together. Because really, when you're going out for money, that's all that most people are interested in. If I went to a finance house now and said, oh, I need to be cutting some Manel sheet to size, can you give me some money? Then what the bloody hell is Manel sheet? Nobody's going to understand that. They're not interested. All they want you to prove is that you know what you're talking about. So as long as you know what you're talking about and you know what you want to achieve, you can try and put that in simple language that these simple people understand. But what they really want to know is how much money you're going to make. And have you really covered all the costs that you're going to incur? So the decision-making process is sort of starts with the opportunity, moves on to you having a plan, and then you have to put some numbers behind the plan. And you might need to get somebody to come and help you do that. If you don't, it's probably a good idea to get people around the table. Obviously, it's not a one-man job. That you do need to get people to collaborate with you to put that together properly. And then you go out to the marketplace. And making a decision about who you're going to take the money from and how you're going to raise that debt is probably the biggest debate, I would say. Are you going to do it on debt? Are you going to take in investment? Are you going to do it on a lease finance deal? Are you going to do it on an asset finance deal? That's the other thing. Understand the financial markets, understand what they can do, understand what the products are, and understand what terms and conditions come with them before you make that decision. Don't just go to a PE house or go to a VC house or go to a bank. Really analyse what product you think is going to be best for you before you actually take the money on. So that's the decision process that we usually go through. And it's generally an investment in equipment, generally. It depends on what you want to do. When I first started in work, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had no plan, and I didn't understand myself. It's only as I started to work for someone else that I discovered that actually I love the technical side of the job and I love the international sales, but I came upon that by accident. So the best recommendation I can give you is to try lots of different things until you find the thing that really fires you up, something that you really, really want to do and really enjoy. And it may not last your lifetime. You might change direction when you're in your 50s or 60s. But ultimately, it's got to be something that you really like. And it may not be related to your degree. It may not be something that your degree has taught you. But it's got to be something you really enjoy. No, never. No, I get asked that question all the time. No, never. And I was quite young then too, and you would have thought that it would have been difficult for me, but it wasn't at all. Mainly because the people that I was going to see and the people that I see now are professionals. And so I'm going with my professional hat on, and I'm going to talk to them in an office environment. It's not a social environment. If it was a social environment, it might be different. It's not now, but it probably would have been then. But no, I've never experienced a problem. The worst gender bias I've ever experienced is in Texas. It's by far and away the most misogynist place I've ever been. It's awful. I mean, I'm accepted now because I'm an old bird, and I've been around forever, and so everybody, they either accept me or they don't, But no, I've never had a problem in the Middle East, never. You keep going, don't be intimidated. Just don't accept it. And maybe the reason that I didn't feel that I was being badly treated in any way or I was being disadvantaged is because it never occurred to me that there was a barrier there. I think if you go in with the attitude that you're going to have a problem, then you're going to have a problem. But if you just let it wash over you and don't let it bother you, if somebody's going to be difficult with you and somebody's going to prejudice your case in any way because of the gender that you are, you just keep charging on through, because at the end of the day, if you're determined enough, there's nothing they can do to stop you. You just go round them, go over them, go under them. You find a way.
Well, Jan, thank you so much for sharing your talk.